Hey everybody, Joe here. Thanks for tuning in again. So now it's time to add some foliage and some greens into my picture. Put some, maybe some bushes here in the foreground. So the first step is figuring out what color I want those to be. And I don't like to do anything without somewhat of a plan because I like to calculate what my colors are going to be. Somewhat. So I'm thinking that this picture is right now staged like there's maybe a cloud over the sun and it's just kind of a general soft light because I don't see any hard shadows. I didn't put anything like that in here. It's easier to paint things without direct light. So I'm going to start that with, because you can just move from the shadow colors to the bright colors. So I'm going to build some bushes in here and I'm going to use these sea sponges because this is a fun tool to use, and I left it in the wrapper just so you could see what I'm using. And so I got these from Michael's, which is one of the art stores that we have here, and I'm sure that you can get them in many other places. Sherwin-Williams carries sea sponges too, where I get my paints. By the way, I get a lot of questions on every video, it seems, about what paints I'm using. You can go to learn.muraljoe.com/FAQ and see a big paragraph that I wrote just about the kind of paint that I'm using right now. Alright, so I'm going to use these to create some texture. A bunch of little leaves. And I used this on a job I did over at the hospital where I had to do just walls of jungle. Okay, maybe just one wall. But that was a lot more than I wanted to do with leaf by leaf dabbing with a brush. So I found this to be a very handy tool. So I'll use this and maybe I'll do some brush work too. We'll see. First thing I'm going to do is just brush the base color. And I want that to be, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to pre-mix my colors. So let's get a bigger brush to pre-mix this color. I usually just use blue and green rather than going straight to a green primary. Now, I know I just called green a primary color, so if you're used to calling only red, yellow, and blue your primaries, let me explain that I call any color that I can't mix a primary. And so if I got a green paint that had green pigment, which I don't have here on the table, it would be brighter than what I can make with my yellow and blue, so I just call it primary green. Alright, so I'm going to put blue and yellow in here because to make natural looking leaves, I don't want that primary green is going to be too unnatural looking. It'll be too saturated with green for how bright I'll be able to make it, you know. So I've tried that before, you know, trying to accent a picture by just using a straight primary green for like the sunlit leaves, putting the brightest green in there. And you know, I always have to dilute it some. I can never use just the green, it just looks unnatural. Alright, so this is still a pretty bright green using this. That's one thing I really like about this bright yellow, that this is actually called bright yellow. That comes from the Sherwin-Williams paint store. And mixing that with this real deep blue that is very similar to phthalo blue makes a real brilliant green. So I definitely don't want something that is that intense. I'm going to add black to it. Alright, so this is going to be a shadow color. Now my shadow, I don't have to make it bluer than the rest, but I like to add blue to the shadows because to me it adds a nice feel. I could just add black and it would still look like shadows just because of how much more gray it makes. It gets rid of a lot of the green by adding black, you know, but adding the blue makes the shadows look kind of deeper and more like outdoor shadows to me. So I like adding blue to my green shadows. Alright, let's get more black, and I'll decide if I'm going to add some white. I'm not sure at this point. I might add some white. I'll put it on there first. And then we'll see. You know, the question is, how green do I want this to be? Do I want it to look like those super color enhanced videos of tropical islands on TV? Or do I want this to look a little more earthy? What do you think? I'm going to add more blue. And the idea is that this is my dark color. With everything I paint that has light and shadow on it, I'll have my shadow color, I'll have my, what I call the true color, even though it's not literally the true color of the object. It's just the color that I base the shadow and the light off of. It's like a center point. So this would be my dark color. I want my dark color and my light color both to be less colorful, less saturated is the word, than the true color that they come from. So by adding black and blue to this, obviously it's going to make it less colorful. Alright. You see, a lot of times, you know, a painter might start with a shadow color and then just start adding white to it to get the highlights. Well, what happens is you're essentially adding black then white and adding gray overall, and you don't get the natural look of an object that has both the shadow and light coming from the same source color. So it's good to have three colors. You have your source color that both the shadow and the light are based off of, so that every time you transfer from the dark to the light, you put that source color in between. I don't mean to confuse you. Now I'm calling it the source color. Maybe I should change my terminology, make it permanently that. Okay, I like the way that looks. We'll see how that goes. Let me see. Let me just put it on here and see. Definitely nice and dark. I think that well, I think I would like it if it was more blue. There we go. Now, since there is no possible way I'm going to use that much paint to do these little bushes, I'm just going to pour some of this into the other little cup and use that to make my highlight color. There, now I'll make my bright green by adding yellow to that one. Alright, I like the way that looks. So we'll call that one good. Maybe add a little water to it. And this is a little container of water that I have down here. I don't know how well you can see that. This handy little brush, it's pretty cool. You know, these it's kind of a long bristle brush that kind of reminds me of sign painting brushes in a way. Good buddy over in Australia, Mark McCall, gave me this brush. I've used it many times since I received it in the mail from him. So that was a fun little gift. Alright, so all I was doing was just watering this down. That'll make it a lot more workable if I'm dabbing it with the sponge. So now this one, I started with the dark color, and I'm going to add yellow. So you can make a green just by adding black to yellow. It'll have a very kind of grayish brownish green result, a very dirty looking green, but nevertheless it'll be a greenish result. So just by adding green to this black and blue mix, both of those produce green when you add yellow. So that's why I know that I can just make a brighter green here just by adding the yellow. And you know what? Let's make this that middle color. We'll make this the middle color that both the shadow and the light are based off of. So I'll take some of this and I'll just add white to it for my bright color. That's all I'll do. Alright, so we want a nice green right there, maybe just a little more blue in there. That green looks a little on the kind of olive green side, which is a little bit of a reddish brownish green, so we'll add some blue. Just a tiny bit. Now between these two colors, this clearly is the one this brighter one is clearly the green that has the higher ratio of blue and yellow, making the brighter green. So you see, this is my saturated color, what I also called the source color that you make the light and the shadow from, or I've called it the true color. I mean, whatever you want to call it. It's the color that I build the light and the shadow off of. So when I do the third color, it's going to be like this. Here, we'll just throw some white on top of this lid, and we'll grab some of this green. And see, I can just take a sponge and just dab it right in that big puddle of paint for my light color. And this is what it looks like on my canvas, so probably more white. We'll see if that stays wet. Probably will, because that's a lot of paint on there. Okay, cool. So now I've got 3 colors, and I'm gonna start with the shadow and then work my way to the lighter color. Let me get this. I'm just gonna kind of keep this in my hand. I like to always have a towel handy to wipe any excess paint or water on. I always start with wet tools. When I'm first getting going, I'll just dip my brush or sponge, whatever it is, in the water, because I don't like when the dry tool meets the paint, it kind of puts, speed dries it in the tool. It appears that my easel is not perfectly square. I don't know why. I made it myself. Actually, my buddy Scott, he built these easels for me, but see, I was the helping hand. I was holding the boards up saying, yep, that one looks straight, go ahead and nail it in. So it'd be my fault if these are crooked. Alright. Just putting shadow on there. Now, even though I'll probably cover up a lot of those little leaves I made, I'm just gonna put the shadow color on to help me visualize my shape. Now I'm using my brush to make little shapes like this. See, this is why I like using these brushes that have this shape to them, because with this shape I can make a rectangle or square. I can make a circle by taking the point and putting more pressure as I go down and then less pressure as I come up. So just a dabbing motion makes a round shape. And I can make a little triangle shape just by laying the corner sideways. That one didn't work so good, But by doing a motion more like that, I can get these little shapes that are different. So yeah, that's not a perfect triangle, but it's diversity is what I'm after. So I have all these different shapes that I can create with different strokes of these corners. Whereas a round brush is going to be harder to manipulate and turn different directions to get different shapes. So when I'm doing something that I want to look like a bunch of random leaves, I'll mostly use the corner. I'll point one corner at the canvas and use somewhat of a downward motion, but I'll go all different directions and create these diverse little shapes that are more like little leaves. But this is also why I got the sea sponges. That's a good alternative to this method. I'll do a background first here. So I'll grab some of this white that I put on there, and I'll grab some blue. So essentially I'm just adding sky color, just like I did with everything else that I wanted to look far away. if I just add blue and white, like this, and then of course I'm mixing that with the shadow color and not my saturated color, so my color is going to be all together pretty gray. But I'll keep it a little bit darker than these background colors here. Alright, so let's keep the shape small here, and this might be a good time to pull out that sponge. Let's put a little bit more of this, darken it a little because I want it to stand out from that background, and I'm going to put just a little more blue in there. Alright, so now I'm going to pull out one of these sponges. So this is trial and error, which one is going to be the best, because you know you get a few of them in a pack. So I'm just dipping it in the water right now, squeezing it out. So this sponge is wet, but I wrung it out, you know, so it's not soaked. And what I'm going to do is I want that to be loaded with paint before I try to do texture with it. This might be enough on here. Let's try to wipe some on the edge. Alright, so I'll just take this and try going some different directions. And see, I get, in a much shorter amount of time, I get very, very tiny shapes that might be more likely on some more distant foliage. But this is really spacing them out, and so I'm going to squish it together with my fingers because, you know, these are distant. So I want everything to be in small shapes clumped close together. So I'm just squishing this sponge together to get the fine texture, but without it spreading it out too much. There, I like that. That looks like leaves that are further away than these down here. So then those, I'll get more paint on this and have a heavier hand, and maybe even use a different part of the sponge if there's a part that's bigger. Right there. There, so I kind of made a spot. Fingering out that way, I think it'll look good if I take that and just make it coming out just beyond that. Let's see what the other sponge looks like. That'll be fun. Here, soak this one. We have this dark shadow color to spare, so. A little different than the one I just used. You know, I kind of can roll this one, get that different look there. Just trial and error, you know. You can see what happens with whatever comes out of the package there. All right, so now I'll move to my middle color, which is the color that I made the shadow and the light off of. So, you know, why am I reaching way over there? I can just hold it. Okay, so I want to put less down here at the base. Okay, so I think of a bush as a combination of many little bushes. I just looked at the screen on the camera, and I see that my head is really big on the camera right now. You know, my son is like my 17-month-old son. No, 17, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, about 17 months, yeah. He's like in the 90-something percentile for head size. It's big. Most of his body weight is in his head. All right, so here is my source color. I like source color. I like the way that sounds. Okay. And I'm tapering it out, making smaller shapes. So notice that I'm working in, rather than evenly distributing it. See, that's what makes something look unnatural, is when you evenly distribute it. So I want to make identifiable clumps in here where I have the larger shape made out of many small shapes. And I want to make sure that on top of every dark area, I want to have some lighter colors showing so that it looks like light is coming from above. Okay. All right, that looks cool. Let's put a little more out in here. Let's put a little bit more bright colors out on this edge, not as much, more light is getting to more of the leaves, and so I'll be more liberal with it out here near the edges. Save that darkest color for the most central shadows of the bush. I might want to rinse out my sponge, but a lot of times it just doesn't matter. Why don't I just wipe it out over here where I'm gonna do that other bush. There we go. Now I'll dab it on that lid where I mixed the white with my source color. True color, source color. Still undecided. The jury is still out on that one. I don't know what to call things, but I know how to do things. All right. So when you have, that light blue sky reflecting off of these colors, it's a combination of different colored lights, which always results in a less colorful result. That's why this light color, I just added white and didn't try to make it a real bright green, because I want it to look like the light of the sky lighting up these leaves. So by just adding white, I can make it look like a natural highlight. There, and remember, these colors are going to dry to a little bit greener hue than what they are now. Okay, and I like the way that looks. It's good. So you can mess with this, you can mess with it, probably make it worse, but it can be fun to manipulate the shadows with the big brush again. Come in with the shadow color, and if it looks like you overdid it somewhere, which I almost always do, you can get rid of some of the detail in areas. Make sure that you have areas that have nothing. You want to have areas where you didn't do texture. You want to have some areas with nothing and some areas with a lot, so that things are broken up. I'm not sure that did anything at all. But I do like how this is up here, and what I'm going to do is I'm now going to add even more white to that shadow color. So this was a little bit of white and blue added to my dark color. So now I'll add even more white to that to even do little highlights on that background tree. And really, there's so little of that showing. I almost think that I should make more of it show first here. Let's do that. Let's make more of that showing up. So what was that? Like this dark color and some white right here and some blue. And a little more on that dark color. It was something like that. It's kind of fun to come in and paint negative space too. Once you have a color like that, maybe you can come in and just in these dark areas, put little spots close to each other, and it might look like branches in the shadows. Now this was totally unnecessary. I totally did it just for the purpose of putting a few highlights on that background. And let's put that background color shooting out here a little bit too. I'll put a little more blue in there, trying to make it match that first color I put down. It's definitely a brighter blue-green. I don't know how that happened. I think I had some bright blue-green left in my brush, so I'm just going to add black and white to kill it a little bit. Get that color to be a little more gray. And just get some of this white. There's nothing, no special tricks to making something more grayish. You just add gray. Yeah, I think that's the problem, is I just had a lot of brighter color still in this brush from mixing those batches. All right, let's grab some of this because that color is now a little bit too light. You can see that it can be a delicate balance of what's lighter and what's darker. You see this, I want this to be darker than this, but I want it to be lighter than the dark tones in this. Yet, it is going to be darker than this medium tone, so then I battle the issue of how is my foreground going to still look like foreground if they're pretty much the same darkness? Because that foreground color, this greenest color, is real similar in darkness to this grayer color. So I'll strategically try to not do too much overlap of this true green to this grayer background color, knowing that they're similar in value. There we go. Now we got a few little branches shooting out right there. That brush needs a good cleaning. So, I think it would look good to boost up the shadows a little bit more in this also. I didn't like how I hit this part real hard and did a little more highlight than I wanted to there. So maybe I can hit that again. Hit that again with the green. Alright, so now let's get this light color again and let's add even more white. So see, this is that color that I made. And let's see how this works out. I'm adding white, I'll take some blue because this is my distant background. See, this color was the highlight for these. Well, so I don't want it to be exactly that color. I want it to be definitely light, but I don't want it to be quite as green. So I'm going to add some blue to it to be a little more like all my blue or distant colors, but try to keep the lightness, add more white. Okay. So let's just add some little highlights on top of this area now. Now I'm squishing this sponge again and trying to put little clumps that kind of fade downward. There. Oh, I think that did it. Now that's going to darken down, and I'm really counting on it darkening down as it dries to be just a shade darker than this one. So we'll see how that goes. It might not be quite dark enough, and I would qualify that as a mistake if it doesn't get darker than that. So we'll see. That'll be fun. All right, so then You know, one thing I always liked was I'd watch Bob Ross. I always talk about him, you know, because I just watched him all the time on Saturday mornings on PBS. And he would say, there's no mistakes, just happy accidents. But see, I didn't agree. That was one thing I definitely did not agree with. As someone that just wants to be able to control the outcome of my picture, I was not satisfied with happy accidents. There, see, that was just kind of a perfectionist moment right there. You know, I'm not a perfectionist too often, you know, but once in a while I can be slightly perfectionistic. Oh, I like how that was cool right there. But no, that added, no, that was a happy accident. That actually was one. It's a big shape over here, so it adds perspective of bigger shapes coming out this way. So it made my bush look like it's rounding out this way. Nice. I'll do another one there. Another one there. I like that. That probably wasn't necessary. All right, let's move to the other side. Let's do something over there. I don't really know what I'm going to paint over here. That paint is still a little wet. But maybe if I just start creating shapes of leaves, I'll get an idea. Something will come to me. I did say that I wanted to make something overhanging the water. So I think that would be cool. So we'll put some shadows down low. And I'm going to try to lay this off a little bit. You know, in paint contracting, laying off it doesn't mean that you lose your job for a while. And laying off means that you skim across the surface with the brush to take out the uneven spots, to smooth out the surface, smooth out the brush strokes, or take away any thick spots or drips. Just lay it off, smooth it out. All right, so then we grab our little handy dandy sea sponge, and I've got my middle color that I used on, same thing as the other side there. So I'm gonna start right out with a bigger shape right here, and then I'm gonna put smaller shapes here. And when I make these shapes, you know, I'm gonna make them taper less and less. So I'm trying to make a gradient that goes from the most green here, less as it gets toward the middle. Something I didn't mention on the other side. Let's put some of this dark color in there too, because then I can get the look of some little leaves that are down in the shadows. Oh, that's kind of cool. I did a little bit of a twist. Looks like they're kind of hanging down. See, I still think that I went too light on this background color. So I'm going to just add dark colors into this background. But I'm going to keep the texture really fine. See, I dab it a lot. You know, that's another thing that will separate the background from the foreground, is how fine the texture is. Your eyes are really sensitive to texture. And so if I make this texture noticeably finer than the texture of this foreground bush, that's another way to keep it separate. And I was just realizing as I was over here, see, I do that. I think about this side of the picture while I'm painting that side, you know, because I'm just that obsessive about it. Yeah, I definitely think that that's an improvement for that, because I wanted that color to be darker. But you know, I need to be patient and let it dry. Definitely need to do that. Let's get a little bit of blue. Put it in there. Man, you could just paint a whole picture. You just paint a whole picture with these sponges. All right, so let's grab this light color. And just put some there. The light color is going on top of my my true green there, because I want this to be a graduation from the light to the green to the dark. I don't want to just randomly put the three colors. I want them to transition in their specific order. That's what's going to make it look like three-dimensional clumps of leaves. Don't overdo it. I don't know what kind of plant that is, but looks enough like greens to me. All right, that's cool. Like that. Now I'm gonna just take some pure white, and this I could do with the brush or the sponge. I don't know. What do you think? Now I'll pull out this tiny little sponge that was in that pack. See, I got this little guy. I'm just gonna use pure white to do some highlights. See if I want these to look like they're more reflective. Leaves can be kind of shiny. So if I put pure white and just a little amount, you know, just a few speckles of it, then it'll look like the sun reflecting in spots. But see, I got to be real careful that I don't do a million little speckles, or it's not gonna look right. So I can just put pure white here and there. Sometimes using pure white right on the edge of some color it'll cause that white to look like a bright version of that color. So it can be a trick to making your colorful highlights not look washed out with white, is by making them end with a pure white, but that white is surrounded by the color. Let's see, if I put too much of it, it's going to end up looking like a bunch of little apple blossoms. Had to step back for a minute and see. I'll just put a few specks here. Sometimes I try to break it up a little bit if it looks too clumpy. Maybe we should add some shadows under those trees. So one way I do that is just by adding red to the green while it's still wet. So you see, if I had this green's still kind of area is drying, it's not very wet anymore. So I'll put some on there so that you can see when just like I did with this background on the dirt. I'll take some red now and just put a little bit in there, and then I'll get rid of the rest. Just wipe it on some surface somewhere so that it can get on some of my tools unexpectedly again. Then I add white to that mix in there, and see it blends up into that. And that red and green mix creates this very, very grayish, what would you call that color? What would you call that? A very, I I guess it's just a reddish gray, slightly brown. Slightly brown, reddish brown, shade of gray. Yep, still trying to define the color and can't. Okay, so now I can take a brighter color. I'll take white and maybe I'll add just the tiniest bit of orange to that. So I need my yellow. See, but I don't want to overdo it. I really overdid it on that dirt that's under the water. I really want to change that later. But this, I won't overdo it. I'm just adding a tiny bit of orange color. And then I'm going to come in here and just put some little kind of diamond shape. See, if I just drag the corner sideways, it makes this little diamond shape. And it's like the light breaking through those leaves. And then I'll make those shapes bigger as I come closer to me because the leaves are getting thinner, more light is showing through. And now I actually have some direct sunlight in my picture. So I've just brought in, kind of a different element of bright daylight in there. And while I'm at it, I can just make it feel consistent by adding more of that same color down here to add some edges on this rock. So it's not the only place on this rock that's getting hit by the sunlight. See, I didn't come all the way up into this grayish shadow because then it looks like this edge that's coming out further is getting struck by the sun. When I first started painting, I really felt like making things look natural, making things look believable was in the details, in making very lifelike details. Well, the more I experimented with colors and realized that sometimes pictures that are very realistic are also very blurry, I realized that it's really just dialing in the color that immediately causes a perception of, oh, that's a rock, that's a bush, that's dirt, that's sun shining through. It causes it to feel like something you've seen before when those colors are really done well. All right, I'll leave it there. And let's see, what should I do next? I wonder how this compares to this color back here. I'm just curious. I think while I've got this brush in this nice bright color, that'll be a nice accent on this beach back here. Just the tiniest little strip. Just became a sunny day here. But I want to be careful with any shapes I make back here. I want to keep my lines nice and horizontal. Rinse out that brush, and I'm going to kind of try to blend out that edge there. For me, the little brush is just temptation, temptation to take a really long time on a job that needs to get finished. Because man, I can really get lost in details. I want to make reflection on this water, like this is just hovering right over that water. So on this one, I made the reflection just darker than this, but on this one, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to make it just lighter. So the reason I'm going to do that is because here in the foreground, I've established that there's some light coming from under the water as the sun is bouncing off of that dirt, and you're still seeing that lake floor. So that light will combine with the reflection of this shadow on the tree, making it not as dark. as it would have been if there was no light being added to that. So I'll take this shadow color that I've got right in here and get distracted for a second while I fill in some shadows and make these gradients a little bit smoother. See, I do that, I'm like, okay, here we go, here's what we're gonna do. And then I don't do it at all. No, really, let's do it. Okay, that's the dark shadow color, and I'm gonna lighten it, and I'm deciding what is gonna happen when this slightly grayish green mixes with this dark green, almost nothing but getting lighter. When I added white to this, it made a brighter green. It looks like a brighter green than the greens up here. I don't want that, because whenever you combine different colors of light, you end up with a less colorful result. So I'm going to imagine that this is combining slightly with some of these browner, more tan tones under here, and so I don't want it to look even greener than the source. So what I'm going to do is just add black and white, and I still want it to be lighter in comparison. So let's put a little bit of white in there. So I'm going to remember too that as I'm painting this reflection, a lot of these brighter leaves, it's the side facing up that's bright. So as I'm flipping this whole three-dimensional image upside down to be the reflection under the surface of this water, I need to remember that I'm reversing these leaves. So a lot of these bright upward facing surfaces are not going to be showing because I'm flipping them upside down. So if some of these are facing straight toward me, yeah, then I might see them in the reflection. But the point is that I want to see less of the highlights in the reflection. So what I'm going to do is just start putting little horizontal lines that are the reflection of this, and I'm going to kind of chop off little bits of this tree in order to do that. So I don't have to think real hard about this, I'm just painting over what was there. This is gonna, for the most part, block out anything that was over there, so I'm just gonna put these horizontal strokes together and leave some of this light color showing through, because as those waves turn forward a little bit, they might catch a little bit of the sky up here out from under this bush. So I'll just leave a little bit of that kind of blue, violet, gray showing in between this. Just putting horizontal strokes. Now I do try to pay attention to the shape of my brush strokes still, just like with the water. I want strokes that are fattest in the middle and taper on both ends. So I start with a light touch, and my touch is heaviest right at the center of the stroke. And then I try to lift off gradually enough that I get a tapered end on each stroke, like this. Light, heavy, light, so that it's tapered a little skinnier toward the ends. So then as I get lower in the picture here, I might put, see, I've got the face of waves showing here. Well, this backside might be at just enough of an angle to barely catch some of that reflection. So maybe I'll put a little bit on the back sides of these waves. Put a little water on my brush. I want to see that reflection close in as it gets up under this here. But see, I do have little areas of that background showing through, so I want to put, see here, I should have left a little bit for that little blue spot. Should have left a little bit going down. Not because it has to be done, but because those are nice little accents that I don't want to lose. So I'll bring it right up under this so that I have some horizontal edges that look like the water is burying the tree a little bit. Now I can always come back with that light blue-violet and add little bits in here. Like I've said before, it's just paint. I can always redo stuff. And I probably will. So now I might go just slightly darker right under this tree. Because when there's a reflection, and I'll add a little bit of blue too, just because I like adding blue to my shadows in outdoor scenes. A little bit of blue, a little bit of black. Make this slightly darker in here, where it's right under the tree, just to make it look like it has a little more depth. It makes that darker shadow color. Just a subtle difference to make this look a little more three-dimensional. Oh, I wasn't thinking when I did that. Here, let's get that lighter color. I said I was just going to do it right under here, and then I went, brought it right down there. I don't know why I did that. I was thinking about the shape of the reflection right here. I want this to be lighter. There, I want to save my darker color for just right up under here. All right. Now, look, this goes a lot higher here, so there I should bring those colors down in here. So now I would definitely see some of these brighter greens showing up as it got down in here, so I should do that. I should take my brighter green right off that lid, and I'm just going to make it less green. I'm going to add, this dark color and some white, just to make it grayer. And because it's mixing, just like the others, it's mixing with that more brownish colored underside. So I'll just put this light color inside of the dark colors that I've already established. Just little slashes in there. See, I don't really want to make brand new spots. that are just the light color. Except for maybe, you know, if there was just a couple right here in this brightest area, because they might be just nicking the top of this. And while we're at it, we might as well put some white in there, because there's also some white highlights. But now this white is much brighter than this. So now combining this with this darker color, no, I'm not going to do a lighter. Obviously I can't do a lighter result than white, but it's always an average that is between the source color and what it's reflecting off of, the colors that are under the surface. So my brightest highlights are not going to be as bright. My darkest shadows are not going to be as dark, because that underwater color is lighter than the darks, but darker than the lights. Man, that'll hurt your brain if you think about it for too long. Just do a real quick little bit of that blue violet. I think that'll be cool. I think that'll be a good looking addition to this. Now remember that I pretty much just used black and white and a little bit of blue to get that color. So I can just mix it again. And I think close will be good enough on this. So he says. All right, so here, you know, I might take this shape. See, I have this patch of blue negative space in my tree up here. While I'm at it, why don't I just add a little more? And then I'll make this an interesting part of the picture by bringing that down. See, I'm just looking for my little negative space spots and just putting a vertical stack of these dashes below it. Because you would have multiple little wave edges as you got down lower. The wave edges that are down here are tipping back to capture that reflection. So that's why it gets stretched out. That's why, you know, when you have the sun or the moon on the horizon and you have all those little ripples, that reflection will go all the way down, because, you know, even the waves in the foreground are tipping back toward that reflection to show it to you. Okay, now I love the way this came out. That's great, but I'm very disappointed with my background colors. With this, I didn't do such a great job with that, but this happens all the time. And it's going to continue to happen, so this is another troubleshooting opportunity. For how green it is, it's not dark enough. See, it has so much green in here, but yet it's almost equally as light as this. So as anything gets closer, the shadows need to get darker. And so it shouldn't stay this light. I don't want something to be this light and still that far back. You know, I added all that blue and white background. I don't want all that atmosphere lightness added to it and still having it be that bright green. That doesn't make sense. So I need to make this darker. That's the point of this. I'm going to make it darker and bluer because I want it to still be separated. And so if I just make it darker, I might start to lose my foreground bush. So it's kind of a delicate balance. And so as an artist, you know, you want to strategize. It's something you don't get to do as much with photographs, but you can cheat a little with these and make sure that that background color separates and has a different enough color to it. So it's a redo. Let's put blue, and that was a ton of blue, so I'll just get rid of a little bit of that. Now I'm putting my shadow color for my bush, and then I'm going to add white. Now I added too much white that first time. Let's see what this does. So I have a lot more blue in there, you can see. And I want to add black too, because I don't want that color to be real brilliant. I want it to be a lot more grayish in comparison to this foreground bush. Yeah, I want it to be more colorful than this one, which it is. You can see where I dabbed that paint, that it still has more color. So this is a nice in-between color. So I'm going to stick with that one. All right, so I'm going to fill these in. And I'll probably end up redoing some of my foreground bush too, because now I'm painting over that. So why am I tongue-tied? Now I'm going to get my little sponge that I did my background texture with, and we're going to get some of that color on it and do the little texture. I need more paint before that's going to work. Let's do the same thing again. Dark color, white, blue, need more blue. Get some of that black. And a little more white. Get a little more of that. Okay, that looks real similar. And so now I probably have enough on there that I can take my little sponge and just dab that up there. Why don't I break up this edge a little bit, put some little bumps going up. You know, little clusters of bush. Yeah, that's definitely gonna look better. That has the right balance to it. So now, why don't I use some white? I'm just gonna mix my green color. This is my true green color, and I'm gonna mix white with it, just like I did for that foreground. I'm just gonna use a lot of white and just real delicately dab it on there and try to get a real fine texture rather than the big shapes. See, now I'm turning the sponge a different direction just to dab it out and make it look more blurred together and distant. Kind of dry sponging it. There, I like that better. And then I'm going to add little bits of this just to be sure it stays dark enough. I don't want to do this again, so I'm going to put little bits of that dark color in there just to be sure that it continues to look dark enough to be closer in this hill right here. Yeah, that looks better. And now, of course, I have to redo my bush in the foreground. Although it does kind of look cool with just that little bit, doesn't it? Kind of like that. Let's see what happens if we do it a little out of order. Let's do the middle color first. We'll do that true green on there. Kind of looks good to break apart some of those white clumps. Then I'll add some of my dark shadow in there. Let's put some dark shapes that are underneath the light shapes. I don't know, it doesn't really need much else now. Kind of did it. But that really kind of set it off. I like the way those dark shapes look coming down right there. And then I like how the green broke up the white. I'm going to do that on this side too. Break up a little bit of that pure white. Because like I said, the tiny amounts look like little bits of sun reflecting, but you don't want it to be in clumps. There, just break it apart a little bit. Because I said I would show everything. I'm showing myself barely lightening this shadow color because it's slightly further away and the water reflects light upward and lightens it. You know, when things are down by the water, light reflects up at it. So this is going to look more like it's down by the water if I lighten up this shadow color. And I know it looked fine before I did this. And nobody's going to appreciate in the end that I did this. But I'm still going to do it. It's okay if some of those little dots stay dark. Of course, now that I'm being this perfectionistic about it, there's all kinds of issues with the dirt color that I'm going to have to address. Well, really just one issue. It's just too orange. I'll have to change that later. There, doesn't that look so much better? See, to me, that just improves the picture. I just need that. I need that so I can sleep good tonight. Okay, let's do some Q&A from last week's post. If you watch the video at 1.5 times speed, says Jay Sullivan, you can save over half an hour, and it's barely noticeable. DTH Rocket says, he sounds super manic that way, haha. I'm sure that I do. I wonder if I could really do that in real life, if I just really hurried and really talked fast. It'd be a good challenge. Ellie Bud, hi Joe, I've been enjoying your tutorials for quite a while. Just wanted to say, you're a very talented artist and a very generous teacher who shares as much as you can, so thank you. Well, thank you, Ellie. Oh, P.S., I'm Italian. Hey, all right, that's cool. And thank you for the very nice compliment. Thank you, Chris, for giving this shout out to my brother Ben. Can I just say on behalf of all your fans, a big thanks to your brother who does a great job bringing your videos to us. You know, it's true. He probably does a lot more than what's visible on the finished product in order to make the videos as valuable and make the instruction seem clean and in order. You know, there's a lot of times when I ramble and things actually lose meaning when you start going on too much about something. He's good at understanding what I'm saying and making it make the most sense on video. So again, thanks to my brother Ben for doing the great work with the videos. Utku Demersil says, are they acrylic? talking about the paints. You can go to learn.muraljoe.com/FAQ to read all about, I said that earlier while I was painting, to read all about the paints that I'm using. Yes, they're acrylic. Acrylic latex paints are commonly used on walls, and some have a higher percentage of acrylic, some have a higher percentage of latex, depending on what they're for. So acrylic is probably the more expensive compound to have in paints, and it doesn't have the stretchiness that the latex paints have that you paint walls with. So I like these Sherwin-Williams paints seem to have a lot of acrylic in them, but they do shrink a lot because they're not just a tube of acrylic. They shrink a lot more when they dry. So they're good for big pictures. They don't have as nice of a texture on the smaller pictures. Texture, leaving behind the texture of the brush strokes. But I really like them just for working fast and getting nice colors. JF Gymnaz says, Joe, you're what I call a McNasty painter. Skilled, intelligent, inspiring to say the least. All right, I'm going to stop there. That's too much, but thank you very much for the nice compliment. And much love and respect from Mexico. That makes me very happy to hear that as well. Thank you. Margot Wright says, could you paint the full reflection and then the white? I mean the waves, etc. I think that what you're saying is, could you paint the reflection first and then the wave faces over the top? And yes, you can, when you understand what the different parts of the waves are, you can paint them in any order. And I've done it both ways. I find it a lot easier with oil paint to do calmer water like this, exactly like that, doing the reflection colors first, then painting little wave faces over the top of that, because the paint stays wet and I can just blend those little oval shaped wave faces into it. Either way, both works as long as you know what you're doing and what part you're painting. Then I think it's great to experiment with multiple ways of doing it. Tatinda Sigauki, I'm just learning to paint and you're my first teacher. You made it so simple. Thanks from Zimbabwe. Thank you for taking the time to leave that very nice comment. Again, makes me very excited to know that you're watching my videos all the way over in Zimbabwe. Shed's channel. Thanks, Joe. You're such a huge wealth of artistic knowledge and a little bit awkward or geeky at times. Haha. I mean that in the nicest possible way. Thanks. I'm sure my wife would agree with you on the awkward and geeky part. And probably all of my friends. Mauricio Martinez says, Muy bonito trabajo, amigo. Now that I understand. So thank you very much. John Smith says, I have the hardest time getting proper tones for trees. They aren't brown. They look gray, but they aren't really gray. But then they're kind of brown and gray and black. Get the drift? Man, it's hard for me to think just reading that comment. I understand your frustration. Sometimes, we get caught up with trying to figure out the question that is not the question that leads to success. The question to ask is how to make the color look natural, not what color to make. A tree can be any color. I've seen a lot of different colored trees. Now, as a very safe bet, I would say you can rely on old red and green with some white to give you somewhat of a slightly violet brownish gray. And that looks very tree barkish to me. You can look at my video, how to paint a tree trunk, to see how I use multiple colors to make the tree color that I've chosen look natural in the picture. That's the key, is the colors you combine it with to make it fit naturally into the picture that you're painting. Sharon Damish says, by the way, thanks for addressing my question regarding the cloud perspective during the Catholic Church job. Hey, I love questions about perspective, and so it's always my pleasure. And I feel that it is a very fundamental, important thing with making paintings look natural, is really understanding the perspective and really sticking with it. So thank you for the good comment. Sweet Latouf. I'm so curious about that name, Sweet Latouf. What does that mean? I watched the whole video and all other parts. I really love watching your videos and always get excited when there's a new one. Thank you very much. Greetings from Dubai. Thank you for that. Makes my day. Beautiful, 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 says Marcus Moylan. Thank you, Marcus. Thanks for that nice shout out again. Eric T. Viking. Hi, Joe, another great vid. Thanks, keep them long and real time. People can always skip ahead if they want to. Hey, thank you, everyone, for telling me that you're not the only person mentioning this. I really appreciate that because sometimes it's hard for me to gauge. I definitely value the feedback. We'll keep them in real time. Teen Fitness said, hello, my name is Dylan and I have been painting and drawing since I was 9. I'm now 14 and I want to take my art to the next level. Have you got any tips on how I could do this? It would be most appreciated. I think, just like I said a minute ago, that understanding perspective very thoroughly is really transforming to your work. You know, if you have perspective just dialed in right on, then a lot of the other things in a painting are very forgivable, or maybe a better word is don't seem to matter as much because the perspective takes you in. Now, colors and shapes are also very important in their own ways. And so what has really transformed my work from the beginning, because at the beginning, my paintings did not look professional and you could definitely see that I was beginning. Forming the question is very important. So you form a question and then that's like a file folder that you have a place to put an answer, and then you can come back to it later and know where to find it and you have it in your brain. If you don't have a question and someone just tells you a bunch of answers, you don't have a place to put that information and it just goes in one ear and out the other. So it's hard to teach where there's no questions. So if you really want to take your work to the next level, then be really, aggressive about finding the question that you want to get answered, and do not believe that there's not an answer, because believing that there's not an answer is a sure way to never find one. That's my best advice to you. A lot of times I don't find an answer. I feel like I've hit a dead end. You ask a different question. You know, if you're really trying, you're not making progress with that question, ask a different question. And a lot of the time you come over here and find the answer you were looking for over here by just asking a different question. It's very valuable to recognize a learning process that works. That's better than any single piece of information about how to paint one picture. Celtic Satan says, please do a Chrome tutorial. I can just tell you right now that when you have an object, when you have a three-dimensional object, so I don't know if this brush is going to work, right? Let's hold this brush up. So you have this light side here where that light is hitting it. You have this dark side, and we call this the shadow. You know, another way to think about light and shadow is being a reflection of either a light object or a dark object. So the floor is darker because there's less light on it, but you don't have to think of it as a shadow just because it has less light. You can just think of it as a darker color that's being reflected off of this object. So when you're doing chrome, you can just take an ordinary gray object that you would shadow, and where you have soft edges gradually getting darker as you round, you know, the underside of a cheekbone or a circle or anything that you're shading. You imagine what's around, you make those edges sharp transitions, just like the real objects that are making those reflections. And when you turn those soft edges into hard edges, and then the next thing you do is make them more the colors of the reflection, less the color of the object doing the reflecting. That's what really defines metals and visually. Lower percentage of the color of the metal, higher percentage of the colors that it's reflecting. And remember, colors that it's reflecting means the dark shadows too. Those are reflections. So, I mean, in painting, I think of them as reflections. I do need to do a visual tutorial about that also. I understand that's a very dissatisfying response to a request for a tutorial, just to get a lengthy explanation. So I want to do that. I want to also let you know that I've been spending a ton of time over the last couple of years trying to develop an app. So I had to learn how to write some JavaScript and HTML. It's just a total headache for me to try to cram that into my brain. I would love to hear your thoughts on this and what kind of features you think would be valuable in an app that is for the purpose of answering color questions. You know, what kind of troubles with color do you think an app could answer for you if anything was possible? Let me know. The idea right now that I have is to give you multiple colors, let you select any color that you can think of. Anything that can be produced by your computer screen is selectable, and it uses an algorithm to mix them when they overlap to show you if they were paint and not light on your computer screen. If they were paint, it'll show you the result. It'll show you the paint mixing result rather than the result that you would currently get from another computer program. Then, once it shows you what it's going to do when it mixes as paint, you can also look at it reflecting off of an object to see what it does when it mixes with light, because a reflection is a mix of this light bouncing off of this light and seeing both. So you have a reflector in the app, and you can change the color of that reflector. Now the reflector could be water, it could be chrome. You could change that, and it would define those things so that you could understand what it's doing to the color in order to make it look like water or chrome or any color. So having this tool at your fingertips to select any color, combine it with any color, whether light or whether paint, seeing what happens when you mix them, I think could be very instrumental in trying to paint, for instance, a blue ocean with an orange sunset. You could select the blue color, you could select the orange background of a sunset, you could watch it reflect off of that reflective surface, and then you could even point at a pixel on the screen and say, show me what paint I need to mix in order to get that color. It would walk you through the color questions. That's my goal. But if you can think of other things that might be cool in a app that is meant to be a tool for artists, then let me know, because I would love to hear it. That's all the time that I have for today. And I want to thank you again for tuning in, and I'll look forward to seeing you again next week.